Hello everybody and welcome back to the Two Norries podcast. I am your host James and I'm joined as always by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hi everyone.
Rowan, my cousin, is on the decks. Say hi Rowan.
Hi Rowan.
Hi Rowan, how are you? And this week we have an author and a therapist, Brigid Walsh-Byrne, a double-barrel surname, and I didn't want to get it wrong. Thank you very much. I apologise for rescheduling because we were meant to be down a couple of weeks ago, but we had a lot going on with live shows, podcasts. I had COVID in between it all. Then I got my wisdom tooth out. And
for goodness
sake.
sake.
An awful martyr, aren't I?
Moving as well.
We bought a home and we moved house as well. So there was so much
for
going
goodness
on.
sake. Going on,
So. You know, what is that up in the top 3 most difficult
things
in a life? Yeah.
And you know what? Like you might think like it might be stressful for them, it won't be stressful for me, but you know what, there's no way around it. Like it's stressful no matter who you are. I'd say when the Dalai Lama was moving home, I'd say he was off.
If a relationship gets through a house move or a house build, that relationship should last forever. Or even an extension or refurb, because we went through it a few years ago. We were only building an extension into the back of the house, and Jesus, the amount of time she walked into the house and started crying, you know, because I might get a bit of dust somewhere around the house, and it was like, God, hard enough now when I was being stretched this way and that way. But the house, anything to do with the house, it can be really difficult.
It's very intimate, really.
Yeah,
you know,
it
it's
is,
like we express ourselves there. You know, so
the thing about moving the house, and I'd move on quickly from this, but the thing about moving the house I found the most stressful is you have to deal with builders, banks, tradesmen, solicitors, and a lot of the stuff takes a lot of time. Nothing is done quickly. A lot of it is out of your control.
That's right.
So I'm very systematic. You know, if there's jobs to be done, I lay them out and I kind of do them and tick it off and do them and tick it off. But when you're buying a house and moving a house, like you have a job that needs to be done, but you can't do it, and then you're waiting for somebody to do it, and then sometimes they're waiting for somebody else to do it, and they get back to you, and that's the most stressful part of writing. But look, we'll do a podcast on moving house another day.
We'll talk to a couple who have actually got a divorce over.
The couples counsellor maybe that can...
and we might be able to help other couples how to deal with it properly or something like that. So,
well, we'll horse into it, Brigid.
Yeah.
So before we get into the therapies, because you're going to tell us a lot of things that will help people that are listening and watching, we'll get into, so people kind of build a little bit of a rapport with you before we get into that stuff. We'll go back to who is Brigid and where are you from and where did you grow up?
Well, I'm one of 6. I'm the second of 6 girls, and the oldest was 7 when the youngest was born. So quite an intense household for my mother.
Steps to the stairs.
Absolutely. And so I'm from Ahada, so just out the road here, half an hour from here.
Is that near Middleton?
Beyond Middleton, in the Whitegate.
Oh, I know Whitegate,
just up the road from Whitegate.
What's the soccer team down there to me?
Cockbeg.
Cockbeg.
Ballintorris.
Ballintorris down there as well.
That would be probably more Middleton, or anyway, it's not Ahada so much. Cockbeg would be the local soccer team.
Tough teams through the
I
years.
would have no clue.
Trust me, they've been tough.
I'd have had some bit of knowledge of the GAA, but not for a long time now since I...
Can you tell us the decade you were born and the decade you kind of grew up around Ahada? Or like what's the era we're talking about?
So I turned 60 with the publication of the book actually as well. So that was kind of, and I celebrated it with a book launch at my 60th birthday at the end of last year. So
what was it like in Ahada around the 60s, 70s?
It was... Oh God!
Is it typical rural Ireland or is it more towny or?
Fairly rural, fairly rural. I have an image of us kind of sitting in knitted jumpers on steps outside. You know, I don't know, but I mean, fairly rural. We were a farming family.
What kind of farming?
Mixed. My father would have done a lot of different things at different, different stages. We would have had a cow to milk when we were small at one stage, and at another time we'd have gone down the road with a bucket to get the milk from the McCarthys, and we would have had pigs at one stage as well, and he later on had chickens, had a house where we'd have reared chickens for...
Pigs are great, aren't they? I remember when I was in St. Francis Farm Drug Treatment Centre, a lot of the food you eat is you cultivate on the land itself, including the animals.
Okay,
So we got in a piglet, but he grew very quickly. But I never know, but they're actually like dogs to me.
They're
like,
smart, yeah.
They'll come over to you, they'll play with you, they're full of personality. Like a cow is in the field and he's grazing, and a lamb, they don't do much. But a pig wants to be over by you, wants to play with you. I just thought they're great animals.
They're smart.
Yeah, I remember them being there, but we wouldn't have had that much contact with them, and they were, I'd say we probably didn't have them after, maybe I was 7 or 8 or something like that. So it isn't a recent memory.
Yeah.
For me, but
and you've 6 siblings, is it?
5.
You've 5 siblings, and where do you come?
Number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah.
And is everybody as tall as you?
The smallest is 5'10", and I stand 6 foot, and there's one of them taller, a little bit taller than me as well.
That's fine.
No one messed with you anywhere around the area, I can guarantee you that. And so it was six of you, 7 of you.
Six of us.
6
Yeah.
6, and my father then was a tall man as well, and my mother was tall, so there was no avoiding it in our house. And we had aunts, that came in, and they were a little bit on the smaller side, so it was kind of,
Must have been nice growing up with so many sisters to play with, I suppose.
Well, it wasn't in a way. I mean, for me, I just always was a little bit on the outside there. Didn't quite have the same freedom as
the elder ones
as
never
the rest
do.
of them. I think there was probably a bit of a dynamic with myself and my mother that kind of put me a little bit
different.
Yeah.
Had you a tough relationship with your mother?
Yeah, my sisters would have always said that, that, I would have said it, but they would refer, sometimes you think that, you think something and other people looking at it wouldn't see that, but my sisters would have always kind of acknowledged that, that there was always a bit of something there. And at the same time, it was what I knew.
I suppose if you're feeling it.
Huh?
I suppose if you're feeling it too, it's definitely going to be a lot more clearer than actually thinking it. If you're feeling like a little bit on the outside.
To get the acknowledgement from the siblings as well, though.
Yeah, that was something that would have come later. I mean, when I was in it at the time, I don't know. That was...
Yeah, I can definitely... But come here, tell us this. How was it growing up there? Did you enjoy life growing up? Or was it a difficult time for you? Yeah,
when I look back, grey.
Yeah, grey. So grey is in between black and red. Or am I colourblind? So what does grey mean to you?
Grey would have... There was no real colour. There was no,
Was there love in your home?
There was. I mean, there were actually, like... how do I answer this now? Like, in a way, my situation feels very different from yours. I was very conscious of coming on here. In a way, my house was very normal. Both my parents, we were regularly fed. All of that stuff. Out to school, very functional. Yeah. There was a lovely warmth between my parents. Like, there was a real affection between them. And at the same time, we would have maybe been tiptoeing around Mum a bit, coming off the bus, coming in from school, and kind of seeing, what kind of form is she in. But we didn't fight, none of, like, we didn't even fight among ourselves. Like, if there was something, you were told to take it off down the yard, and of course we didn't. So that was really, like, the instruction was don't fight, because if there was, go off and fight somewhere else, and it was meant, you would, So we didn't do that, So that was kind of, it would have been quite a quiet house in a way. And I mean, probably people would find it surprising in a sense at how difficult, things were for me, we wouldn't have kind of looked like, I wouldn't have looked like somebody who would have had a lot of trauma, And there's, I suppose part of why I wrote the book is, I was in my 60s, or just before.
On developmental
trauma.
Developmental trauma, yeah.
The causes, the experience, and the recovery.
Yeah.
So
maybe if we can go
we'll start at the causes.
Yeah.
And maybe let's even ask you firstly, what were the traumas that you believed you suffered as a young child?
I think where I'd like to start with that is that, both of your life's experiences would have pointed to inevitably you being assessed for having had trauma. But actually, one of the things that I discovered only in the last 2 years really was that there were things that happened to infants and maybe even in the uterus that can have a massive impact on somebody's ability to relate with others or even relate to themselves. Excuse me, my nose is...
It's fine.
Okay. But you heard our conversation with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, and like trauma is it's not about something that you recall consciously. It can be an experience that your body remembers, and it can happen when you're in the womb, when you're just a traumatic birth can create a trauma that affects you as an adult. So like it's important to understand like that, or a traumatic event has happened and the memory of it brings up the negative side effects down the line. It's not about the memory of it in your conscious memory. It's about how it's stored in the body, and it can be stored in the body of a little baby too.
That's right. I only recently got numbers, but apparently on a unconscious level or implicit level of the memory, we can have 11 million pieces of information over that in 1 second. And we have access to about 7 points otherwise. So all of that is stored in the body. And if we're if we're not traumatized, that kind of moves through. But if you get stuck, if there's an experience that's kind of a bit painful, that gets stored or gets really impacted. But it's what I your mother might get a fright when she's carrying you at sometime in the early few months, and that would have happened to me. I was born by Cesarean section. That was in the recovery process for me. I kind of re-experienced that body remembering sense of that, and that was brutal.
What was it like?
Shocking, brutal. Yeah. Just that sense of kind of the experience coming, making itself felt. That retained memory.
What kind of therapy did you have to do for you to be able to relive something like that? And how did you get that deep into that time and event happening in your life, even though you were so small?
There's a couple of the modalities that I work with and that I experienced that would have taken me there. Okay. But I might come back to that in a minute because it's kind of more to set a bit of a context really for people for whom it's not obvious that you've had trauma. It's like that in the sense, because for me I had spent
Take your time.
Yeah.
Take your time.
A lot of interesting stuff, because what you're talking about now has me very, very, very much cued in. Because when I was a baby, I was born in 1981, okay? And when my mother was giving birth to me, I was told by my auntie that they use a forceps to take me out.
What's that to me?
It's like a big fork.
Oh, I know the arc.
And the damage that was caused to me was so bad that when other fathers were calling other fathers in the ward and other people that were coming in, that to bring him down to see me, because my head had swollen. You know, it was after going up to 2 to 3 times normal child size. You know, and I'm here then sitting trying to understand what that may have caused in my own life, amongst other things, you know.
Yeah.
Because I know my mother had a very, very stressful pregnancy as well, you know, because of obvious stuff that I know and my family know. But that has an effect on people massively, and I have learned that myself through reading books and listening to other therapists. So can you explain that a little bit when you're ready?
Yeah.
Even if there's more stuff that we need to talk about before we get onto that part, let's start there.
Yeah. So one of the things that can happen when is these apparently small incidences, like cesarean birth. Okay, there wasn't a choice. My mother had a curvature in the spine, so she wasn't able to deliver. To deliver any of the 6 of us, actually, and there isn't an appreciation that for the child, like babies come when they're ready, when things are natural and normal. Yeah. But being taken out of the uterus, in somebody else's time, actually was shocking, into an environment that was light, bright, clinical, cold. Even though it may not have been cold, my experience of it, I mean, it was shock, really, probably was what kind of came up for me when I experienced that. But people don't see that as something that would have been necessarily traumatic. There was, and I'm not sure of the why, but there was certainly a shock that I got when my mother was carrying me at the age, in the first 3 months of pregnancy. And there were other things that happened later on. But what these early traumas can do is impact what are known as the developmental milestones that every child kind of has to mark. And they're the word now is escaping me, primitive reflexes, things that as the child grows, the automatic doing changes from being automatic into being something conscious. But the very first primitive reflex that they know about happens in the uterus in the first 3 months. And if you get a fright while your mother's carrying you, either she gets a fright or you get a fright for whatever reason, what happens to the infant is the stomach contracts, back arches, and the whole posture of the child it's like the child will go back against probably the spine of the mother as well. But there's this contracted feeling, and it's contraction that happens. And in an ideal pregnancy, that might be triggered, but it has a chance to work its way out, and it can be then integrated in, so it becomes irrelevant. But if for some reason you have a trauma that doesn't heal in the moment, say if the parent was stressed and remains stressed, the mother was stressed and remains stressed, then that doesn't integrate in the child. So one of the things that happened, there's a man, Stephen Tyrrell, who developed one of the therapies that I work with, and he says, if you haven't fully integrated the fear paralysis reflex, you cannot help but live your life through the lens of fear. So that, for me, was very much something that once I discovered that, it just made so much sense for me. Like the sense of...
Was your life full of fear?
But I wasn't aware of it. Like
that's just how it was, and you just thought that's just how the way everybody was.
Well, it wasn't even that I thought that was the way it was. It was like the first time kind of that I realised that I was tense and maybe a little bit different from all the others, generally around, was two of my sisters were coming home from college with their friends and whatever, and there'd be a whole gang of them, and there'd be bodies all over the sitting room, and there'd be people sitting on the floor and getting massage from people sitting on the couch behind them and all of that. You couldn't touch me because I was that hard. And that was kind of the first time I realised that wasn't normal. It's like the level of tension, just that level of...
Locked in your body.
Completely, but it was I wasn't even aware that it was that painful in a sense. You know, at that...
Because you're living with it.
Yeah, I had no other experience, but it was like when I saw this happening, it was like, okay, you're not doing that to me. It's like that's not happening, but so that was kind of the first awareness of that. And
how old were you then?
I'd have been 20 in my 20s. Like they were in college. They're the two younger than me, so a year and a year younger. So I'd have been 20 thereabouts. So that would have been kind of the first, objective reflection of that. I didn't have that before.
Did it affect your ability, through your teenage years, your early 20s, to form intimate relationships?
Oh, I've had no intimate. That's just, that didn't even. Yeah, that like the first boyfriend that I would have had was, I was in my late 30s.
Really?
Yeah. Were
you lonely in your 20s and teens and?
I was, but again, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I really didn't know that, like on some level, I for a lot of my life would have felt like an outsider among
people,
well, even among my sisters, I wasn't able to play like the rest of them, like there would have been quite a bit of play, but I just wasn't able to do that.
Do you know what you're saying here? Exactly. I can relate to it all, right?
Yeah.
At a young age, I came across drugs and alcohol. And that stemmed that out for me.
Yeah.
Did alcohol or drug, did you ever tip off alcohol or drugs at that point in your life? Because I think if you did,
might have helped me.
It would have definitely took you down that route, because it would have completely opened you up. And what alcohol and drugs does is it gives you the opposite the way you feel.
The core conditions for addiction were there, and if you did pick up, you probably would have just destroyed yourself with the alcohol and drugs.
Well, you see, I probably had my own addiction in a way, but my addiction was a reliance on my mind. Like there was this control, this kind of, in a way, trying to figure things out and the whole things. And it's only recently, in more recent times, in my struggle with meditation, that I've kind of realised that, any time that kind of became close to opening up or getting free, that it's like I'd be back away from there, not even realising where I was going, but I was back into kind of the thing that I could rest on, which was my mind, this kind of rigid way of seeing that, or relating in situations, but it was like away from, anything that would be about feeling or, as far away from that as I possibly.
Yeah, do you know when you were in school, did you go to college afterwards, or?
No, I went from there from school to the tech and did a short, or did a secretarial course at that stage, and then later went in, or following from that, got the civil service. I went in as a clerical assistant. I was there for just under 20 years. And when I left, I had been promoted just once. And that's actually, I'm not a stupid woman. I'm, of quite a bit of intelligence. And that's just kind of remarkable underperformance in a sense for what my abilities are. It isn't a reflection of what I would have been capable of.
Yeah. Is it a case of you weren't able to achieve your potential because of what you were going through, or is it because of sexism in the workplace?
No, there was a whole level of just disconnection from. Well, there was a few things. It's like, even, as I was sharing with you before you came online, anytime about shining was, like excelling in something was something that was, something I couldn't allow myself to do. There's a real big fear around doing that. But also there was a major disconnection. I was thinking this morning, kind of saying, well, what am I going to share with these, these two men? And kind of realizing that just to give an indication of how disconnected I was, like I worked in the Civil Service Commission, which was actually the recruiting body, and also would have, been responsible for exams for promotion and all of that. Yeah. And so there were colleagues. I went for promotion from clerical officer to executive officer, and there were colleagues of mine or people who knew me in the office, as a part of the board. That wouldn't have been the whole board. But I came out of that thinking that I had done a really good interview, and I told my boss at the time. And then one of the really lovely gentlemen who had interviewed me at the time, had a chat with me before the results were out, and he said, "You did a really bad interview." And I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not typical, though, is it? Like, to get your feedback like that before an official...
Yeah.
No, but he was being kind, actually. Like, he was kind of letting me know.
Yeah, the thing wasn't good. Like.
Yeah. And...
did he give you any other feedback of, like, how you
presented it? In a way, it wasn't about that. My telling you that wasn't about that so much as to highlight the level of disconnection from myself.
You thought you did great, but you were so removed from what other people was actually seeing.
Yeah, that wasn't, that it wasn't true, and, so again, it's more to point out that than anything else. And
like, can you describe the disconnection? I know there you were giving us an example, like, but how else would it affect you in your life, or like? When you say you're disconnected, like, are you have friends? You're living in your head. Is it and you're overthinking stuff and you're disconnected from your body, or
there was certainly a lot of overthinking. Yeah. That would have been that was my the thing that I could rely on, my because I am sharp, I am clear.
Yeah.
But
completely introverted though.
Introverted, and at that stage not aware of. Yeah, probably the interactions with other people, yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like my own story in some ways, until I did find drugs. So up until the age of 12 and 13, I was completely all over the place. I felt like I was an alien living in this planet.
Yeah.
I thought everybody else was just put here. I thought I was in the Truman Show when when your man is fucking... being filmed this whole life and everything.
That's right.
I felt like everybody around me was just put here for me to live this mad, weird life. And it was completely caught up in my head, and I hadn't a clue. I literally hadn't a clue, because I thought everybody thought the same way as me, lived the same way as me, felt the same way as me. But it wasn't until I went on my own little bit of a journey that I realised it wasn't. I'm after opening your book here, right? And it's the first page I got to, and I have to just say, there's a diagram here, right? And it says developmental trauma contributing factors. And I looked at all the contributing factors, and I don't say things for pity, but I could definitely say probably every single one of them were a factor in my own life at some point.
Yeah.
So we'll start with witnessing domestic abuse, okay? Sexual abuse, depressed parent, neglect, shock in negro. I don't know what that means.
What's that mean?
It says shock.
Oh, in utero.
In utero.
Yeah, sorry.
Is that in the uterus?
Yeah.
Or for babies?
Yeah.
Cesarean section, an alcoholic parent, quick or a short labour, which we spoke about earlier, being fostered, being adopted, hospitalisation when young, a traumatic birth. This is a good one. Inherited trauma from a parent, which is their trauma being passed on to them, which is completely something that they don't even understand they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely unaware. We have an anxious parent, a detached or remote parent, substance abuse, all these different things. Like a child can start detaching from.
Do you know what's interesting about that? Like compared to the A study, which would be well known and we've spoken about here, the A study doesn't really have pre-birth.
That's right.
Adverse childhood experiences listed. Like in the A studies, like have you been the child of an imprisoned parent, poverty in the home, neglect, violence, addiction, all these things mental health in the home, but there's nothing there about how were you conceived, how was the pregnancy, what was the birth like, and that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it stuck out to me straight away. When I was in psychotherapy, I done the ACE chart with my psychotherapist, and I actually, a lot of them were quite similar.
I thought you were going to say there you aced it.
Yeah, I definitely aced
You
it.
got full marks.
I got full.
That's the one test you don't want full
It
marks.
was probably the first test I ever done that I got 100%.
It's great that we can laugh about this stuff today, isn't it?
Indeed,
Because
indeed.
when you think about the amount of trauma and pain that has to go through to start ticking off these boxes and stuff, but you know, if you can get through it to a place where you can laugh about it down the line, is great. But one thing I wanted to ask, and you feel free to avoid the question.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a conversation with your mother about what the pregnancy was like? Did you ever get some feedback on like what actually was it? Just the cesarean section? Was that the event that caused that fear in you?
No. I never had a chance to have a talk with her. She died in 2006, and you know, a lot of I suppose the clarity that would have come to me, or the healing and insights that I'd have got, came later.
Yeah.
You know. So, but in the sense of the body keeps a score, there are ways to remember, you know, to bring into awareness those things. And they may not even, because again, in utero, it's very pre-verbal, you know, child doesn't have that capacity to think it, but there can be an experience of the shock or the trauma in somebody's system. And I just, like, because of the way things would have presented, it was very clear to me that I had trauma in the first 3 months that never really integrated fully.
Yeah.
You know, but I want to kind of go back to, like, the things that ended up having quite a big impact for me would have been shock in the very early days of the pregnancy, the Cesarean birth. There was an incident between my parents again when I was about 3 that I got caught in the middle of it, and like I had been my daddy's, you know, little girl, and there would have been some level of jealousy by my mother of me, and I got in the middle of something that triggered a response that I ended up being just petrified and terrified. There was no violence done. It was more like the space of something that frightened the 3-year-old. Again, anybody on the outside wouldn't have seen necessarily that there was any great drama in that. At the age of 7, I was masturbating, completely lost in pleasure, utterly spread in pleasure, when I was pulled out of that violently by one of my parents, of course, very Catholic, that's not something you did. I was completely unaware when that happened. So again, shocked and traumatized by that. But again, like, that wouldn't stand out as a big thing, you know, and it was something that was so shocking for me in a sense that I didn't remember that for a long, long time.
What age did you say that was?
I was 7, and I never touched myself again until my 30s.
That's
well
sad.
into my 30s, yeah.
It's sad. Can I ask a very awkward and stupid question? Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a boy. And a boy will not become interested sexually or function sexually until he hits puberty, 11, 12, and testosterone starts booting through the body and erections and all these things, and then you become interested. Is it different for a girl?
I think that you probably would find that mothers of babies and little boys and little girls will be touching themselves You know, like it does happen, you know, except that mostly you're in nappies or whatever, but it does, like, it's not, it's a natural thing, like, but it's not even necessarily a curiosity. It's like, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, and it's not something I've gone into. So I'm just
if anybody listening is, give us a shout.
But you know what? I think it's very, very interesting.
It is fascinating.
It's something that is not spoken about more often, and I think it should be, because it takes the shame away from it.
Yeah,
because it's completely natural.
Yeah, like
does that make sense?
It does. Like, I remember when one of my nieces came to visit me. I was living in North Cork at the time, and it was around about the time, she wouldn't have been long potty trained, I think, but I can remember her standing, and I was behind her, and just this deliciousness in her body. Like, she wasn't touching herself or anything, but just this sense of deliciousness, you know, and innocent and beautiful and just really, really lovely. And that's a natural thing. Yeah. But that, you know, that's okay in, you know, socially in a child of that size, but not necessarily even appreciated for what it is. And that somewhere then later on, like, whatever that expression was or however I experienced it, I couldn't even necessarily describe that to you, you know, would be judged later on. Or, you know, it's like, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff that kind of stops, you know, that is acceptable in a child up to a certain age. And then probably because later on that curiosity will come in at puberty, you know. So there may well be some kind of disconnection there between a natural, you know, sensuality, which, you know, we're creatures that thrive on touch and connection, you know, so that, but our society doesn't actually support that, you know. So again, I don't have a special knowledge about that as such, you know. But I do feel like there's so much that that happens to disconnect us from what's really natural.
I suppose
for us,
it brings us back to the child being itself. It's self, no judgment, no influence, and then all of a sudden the adult, who is conditioned from their parents, coming in and telling the child that sees no harm, it's completely innocent, and that being ripped away from you. Yeah, no, you can't do that. That's Catholic Church now back in the time. Yeah. We have to remember, you know, it was a different time back then. Religion, not so much religion, the church. It was over everything in this country, and that was just an example of how the child is kind of taken away from becoming that person, that true self, that free, that, you know, just light soul, where they go through life and they learn from their own stuff. But,
it's just unfortunate, like, how it came about with yourself, and how that affected you well into your 30s then. Yeah,
but the point that I keep wanting to make about it is that, in a sense, those traumas aren't that obvious, and they weren't even that obvious to me in a way, that they could have such an impact. Yeah. And in a way, like, your circumstances were so extreme from where I stand that it was obvious that you'd had traumatic experiences. And what was really difficult for me was I was in my 30s or in the late 20s before I began to realise that, okay, I'm disconnected here. The interview, I had been sharing a house with a couple of lads in Dublin, you know, just friends, like, there wasn't anything like that. And they asked me to leave because I was too difficult to live with. So again, like, that shocked me. And they probably came around about the same time, those two events. And that was when I began to do therapy, to start kind of realising, okay, there must be something wrong with me. And after that, you know, you name it, I probably tried it. homeopathy, massage, counselling, all of those things. Craniosacral therapy. God, I can't even remember. A lot of them. After about 15 years, I found my way into a meditation school that is still a huge part of my life. As well as meditation, they had practices that would help you to explore your inner world, explore the things that stopped you going deep in meditation, and had methods for doing that, and which are very powerful techniques. And 15 years later, they weren't working for me. And it really brought a sense, and nothing I tried, there might be something would change, but it wouldn't really, it would kind of revert back again. And then I heard this talk by a woman called Kathy Kane, and at the same time another interview by a man called Stephen Terrell. And Kathy in particular described the difficult clients. So she was a body worker, but she was also a teacher of body workers, and she would travel around, she's American, but she would do trainings in different parts of the globe.
A body worker?
Massage, all those kinds of therapies. She would have been she's very knowledgeable in all of those areas.
Somatic, is it? Or
somatic. Partly, and partly just massage, even that. But I don't even necessarily know the full extent of her training, except that she's very highly respected. Would have been going into these different cities around the globe. The therapists who'd been coming to her would have been bringing their difficult clients to her. And
they were releasing trapped emotional stuff within the
it would be that, or else even like what can happen with people who have developmental trauma is that injuries don't heal. It's like because there's often some kind of an emotional impact, caught up in something physical, or the back won't just stay fixed. It's like so people started to bring. She found that she was getting all of the difficult clients, and then she began to start wondering, like, what's this about? And what she realized was that it was people with, and I would have considered myself a difficult client. The therapies just didn't work, and that there was reasons for it. And the reasons for it is that when you have young experiences that are traumatizing, it actually shapes your nervous system. So it's coming at it a little bit differently. Well, probably the same thinking behind it as that man whose name I can't remember. That's the one. But it shapes your nervous system in a particular way. So as I describe in the book, when you're in an ideal birth or, childhood, or as close to ideal as possible, when we're born as infants, we have the full range of emotion. So we can go into the deepest of bliss. And I'm sure, you have been in the presence of an infant, and when they're asleep and there's this beatific expression on there, and it brings you to a silence. It's not like you're just saying, oh, isn't she very pretty? But it actually stills you. Like that's a depth in the child that's touching something in you. So a child has that. But we've also been in the company of a child whose scream you'd hear in the next parish, not a mind. So you've got the angry, rageful, red-faced, commanding the room. You can't ignore it. So you've got this, every child has that spectrum, right? So the role of the parent in that, the carer, the mother, father, whoever the carer is, to be with that child, whatever that their experience is, the intensity of the rage, the intensity of the bliss. In a way, you hold a safe space for them to rest in that and come back. And if they're in a rage and the parent is grounded and present and not upset by the fact that the child is raging or screaming or, but they're able to hold it and be present, the rage will begin to stop. Their nervous system begins to regulate. It comes into harmony with the grounded parent, and their nervous system is beginning to be shaped by that. So they have the experience of going into the full intensity, but their nervous system is being shaped, and they're learning how to come back into calm, right? So that actually has an impact on the physiology. The nervous system has that range. So that's part of the job of parenting, is to facilitate that learning. So if your parent is anxious or absent, or, like there but not there, not able to really connect, or frightened or whatever, and they pick you up and they want the child wants, calm the child down, but it's like, calm the child down, like it's anxiety meeting, meeting some emotion, meeting whatever it is in the child, the anger or whatever. And that's going to shape, the child's nervous system is going to be shaped by that, so that somewhere it doesn't quite learn the same capacity to go all the way out there and know that it can come back safely. So it impacts the shape of your nervous system.
Very important information.
It really is. I think it's really key. Really, really key. And as well as that, like if you're living in traumas, some of those milestones won't be met or won't be met fully. Like one of the other ones that I mention of my own experience in the book is the Palmar Reflex. And again, like everybody has had the experience of putting their hand in an infant's hand, and that happens, and it's quite a catch.
Yeah, baby, grab your finger.
And you can't. You have to kind of.
Yeah.
Like.
Just forceful. Like
You have to make your way out of it. Like it's not just a simple thing. Like they have a hold, and that's a survival mechanism. For me, as an adult, it's not as severe as it was, but if I'm holding hands with my husband, he'll say, loosen your grip, and I will. And seconds later, my grip is tight again. It's not as much, not as much as it was. But even what will happen for me is like I'll find myself doing that. And as a child is developing, what happens, that's the very young one, right, where the thumb is right in the middle. And in the process, that Palmar Reflex, I think I'm not sure, is it in the first 18 months or something that fully integrates. But as time goes on in that development, it'll go to that. And then you become later able to functionally open your hand and close it. Whereas all this is done reflexively. So obviously I have the function of my hands, but I still have this reflex retained. So the physical expression of it is that. But that's not, for me, I have that emotionally, I have that mentally. It's like the rigidity that would have been so much of my experience. I didn't have the security because of whatever frights that I got that allowed that to integrate. So that again has impacted me. And there's so many of those. I'm not sure how many. There's a list of the...
What about a baby sucking it, or an adult sucking their thumb? Have you ever come across an adult sucking their thumb? I know a couple of people. to suck their thumbs, they're adults. I wonder, is this...
It's very likely. I mean, there's one of the other reflexes is there's a sucking and rooting reflex. And again, if you're breastfed, or if a child is breastfed, one of the things that, like, if you run your finger from there to the corner of your mouth, you'll notice my head's turning. I'm not actually turning my head my head turns to that, right? Yeah. So in a child that is breastfed, that's one of the things that they'll do. They'll turn to find the breast. Yeah. And it's actually an important reflex as well, because it's a part of learning to find food. And it's a part of successfully learning to find food, like when you, so there's some part of the child learning that, okay, I can look and find, except that all of us, again, were bottle fed. I mean, it was the thing in the 60s. Yeah. Sorry, my nose keeps running. Okay.
While you're doing that there, I just want to repeat something that you mentioned a while ago, because I think it's very, very important. And what was going through my head at the time was, why are we not teaching young parents this sort of stuff, how to regulate it with a child at a really young age? And like, we look to change our future today in the present moment with the damage already done, okay? But by changing our future in 20 years' time, we need to act upon these things right now and change our future by changing these kids, by giving them the right resources as children, and having, I know it's a massive task, and it's I can't get my head around how we'd even change society in that way. But when you started talking about the regulation of the child and the parent and the stress, and if the child meets the child, because the child is screaming, and if the parent meets him with stress and anxiety, it's just going to make it worse. But if they meet him with complete calmness and love, I can understand how that can become coherent. Because I've been in groups of people meditating where the coherence was just love, and people have gotten healed through that coherent love. Yeah. And it was through the energy. And it's just like, that's the future. That is the changing of the future. That is how we change our adults in the future, and how they become more balanced, more caught up in homeostasis, where they're not caught up in the madness of the, what's it called, the system, something system.
It becomes difficult then, though, if you have a screaming baby and you don't have the skills, or you don't have, maybe you're not in a good place yourself.
Well, that's right. I mean, just because you know what you should do doesn't mean you can. Exactly. Because, as I say in my example, for almost 30 years, I have been actively searching to heal and not getting anywhere in any way that's stuck. So like, in a way, I think that again, coming back to why I wrote the book, was because my trauma wasn't recognized. But I knew there was something wrong, and I had felt like I was wrong, like there must be something really wrong with me. But as I was saying, when this interview that I heard with Kathy Kane talking about people who were like me, who didn't fix, and it's young trauma that has shaped a nervous system that it doesn't have that flexibility, so again, in different environments, you learn how to adapt to that situation, and you have this whole range of emotion that you can actually live with, and it might even be like I didn't do rage, that was something like, I mean, I can remember when I was working in the civil service, there's one guy that I was, friendly with. He was married. He was younger than me as well, a couple of children, I think. But I can remember at one stage there was loud voices between him and me, and I thought, that's it. And he never talked to me again, never. And the following day he came in and was like, there was, I just didn't know that could happen.
Yeah.
But my range of familiar and of emotions that I could handle was kind of in this bandwidth. My nervous system was shaped in a way that supported that. So as long as any therapy that I was getting didn't address the particular shape of my nervous system, or the fact that my nervous system couldn't go in the other direction and feel safe, no therapy was going to work for me. And that for me was huge. Like when she described that, I said, that's what's wrong with me. And I cried the softest tears that I ever cried.
But you are explaining this so well.
Yeah.
And so many people are going to get so much help for this, because you're explaining the nervous system was made through these different experiences as a young child, but they can be changed.
They can be changed once you're aware that that's actually a factor in the back pain, the headache, the low self-esteem, all of those issues. It's like that to me is, like, as I said earlier, I have, you name it, therapy, I've probably done it, somewhere along the line. Almost 30 years getting nowhere.
Yeah.
But not like, and it wasn't that I kind of, once a year I'd decide to do something. I've been working on myself and in the meditation school for a lot of years. And like something that I've been very clear about in the book as well, it's like, it's not that I don't think those therapies have any value. I think like with the meditation school, the work there is profound. But the awareness of the role of the nervous system isn't known. Like it's relatively new. It's relatively new.
But when you got that awareness then, and then the penny dropped for you, did you then have to go and did you find your silver bullet of a therapy that worked for you? I
did. And there are a few modalities that address developmental trauma, but the one that I work, that has worked for me and that I work with is called Transforming the Experience-Based Brain. And it was developed by Stephen Terrell. He's based in the United States. And he has been working with the fostering and adoption services in Austin, Texas, for over 20 years now. But he also had adopted two boys himself, single parent. And it was in trying to meet their needs that he realized that all of the therapies that were being offered didn't work or were too harsh or whatever. And he realized that it was actually a lot of really preverbal stuff, preverbal states, not cognitive. And as long as you're, cognitive stuff helps, and I know that you've had a lot of benefit from understanding, and you as well, Timmy. But it's to provide the therapy, in effect, actually, is to provide the same kind of space for the adult or the child. I mean, he has actually worked with children. I know that one story of a child who was in line for a kidney transplant, and as a result of working with Stephen, they didn't need the kidney transplanted. Just there was so much shock in his system that the kidney had stopped working. So the therapy really holds a space where ideally, a present parent provides their nervous system, to the child. Well, the therapist does the same thing. It's not a talk therapy. It's really a space of holding and addressing. So I encountered this in COVID, and my treatments were remote, but it was bringing conscious awareness with the therapist to different parts of the nervous system. So for me, it was, well, it's actually, there's a 7-point protocol. So it begins by supporting the heart. It's supporting the heart in 2 different directions, you know, just holding a space for the heart, then bringing awareness to the right kidney and the right adrenal gland, and then to the left kidney and the left adrenal gland, and then up to the brainstem. And these are all major parts of our anatomy that are charged with ensuring our survival. And as you bring awareness there, it may take a while, depending on the level of trauma, before those organs even begin to be aware of the fact that they're being held. But as it may be, and as that happens, then your system begins to learn to be able to relax. And each one. And what can happen, I remember, you know, Stephen talking about this then, it's like, what might happen is that in the beginning, you mightn't feel anything for a little while, but then you begin to feel relaxed on the table, but as soon as you put your feet on the floor, it's gone again, because it's a foreign country. Being at ease is a foreign country to you if you've never known what ease is like. And then maybe you'll get as far as the therapy room door as you're leaving, and the next, over a little while, you might get as far as the car. But your system is learning, and it needs to be gradual, because what would have happened to me over the years with different therapies is I might have had something like that was a big experience. But as I said, it's like, if you're kind of, what's the fundamental principle really is that our nervous system is tasked with only one task really, to ensure our survival. And if it knows that, okay, this set of experiences is what has kept me safe, even if it has felt like I'm clinging on by my fingernails to something and it's exhausting. If I'm brought into a space where I'm not feeling that, and I might even enjoy it for a little while, but it's like eventually, and that can be longer or shorter, it's like, you know, what's this? It's not safe here. Like, I don't know what this country is. So it's right back to that again. Yeah. And it makes absolutely no sense on a logical, experiential level. I mean, it's lovely to be at ease. But if that's not built into your nervous system, for your nervous system to know that I can be like that and be safe, it ain't going to hang out there. So in order to get from this limited experience of whatever it is that you do, or I do, and for me there was just this constant rigid tension to get from here into this open country of ease. My nervous system has to learn that, okay, I can afford to be at ease from here as far as the car. And maybe over time, you know, it might actually last a day or so. And over time, you know, so it begins to build up, but your system can then learn, and the nervous system begins to get a flexibility in it in a way that it never had before.
I can relate to in some way what you're saying, because, you know, when I was in addiction, I think my nervous system was destroyed from benzodiazepines, heroin, alcohol, all these things. And I got to a stage where, you know, if you touched me, I would jump like that. Yeah. Even if I seen you doing that, as soon as I felt the contact, I would go like that. Yeah. If I felt contact and I didn't see it coming, I would get a bigger shock. Yeah. And that complete sense of unease in your own skin. If I had a drug in me, I was okay, I could relax, safe. If I didn't have a drug in me, it was like tensed up, fear, the world is unsafe, you're not safe, you know. Even when I came into recovery then, in the treatment centre, I experienced it after the detox. I detoxed from Valium and methadone. For a period of time after that, I felt it. But within the confines of residential treatment centre, I began to say, I can relax here, everything is safe. then you leave the treatment centre, you come back to the big bad world. You go into work and employment and relationships and college and all these things. And it's that easy. But then I got comfortable with some meetings. I remember I was joining a gym. It took me 12 months to join the gym because the fear of it. But I began, like you said, and I work with drug and alcohol services at the moment. And a common thing that we come across is people in early recovery, the sense of fear and anxiety and unease that they feel with themselves, and say, when will it pass? When will it pass? And it's like what Drew said there. The more you go to the meeting, the easier it becomes. The more you go to the gym, you feel that fear, and you do it, and all of a sudden you'll be walking through town one of the days, and you'll think like, fucking hell, I'm actually okay in myself now.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
How's life for you today?
Life is very, very different, and it really turned around a huge amount. It was at the beginning of the COVID scene that I discovered this, and I've been, I suppose, an aspirational therapist in a way for over 30 years probably. Yeah, near enough to it. Somewhere. Yeah. And really, it's only in the last while that I have the capacity in me to really hold a client in the way they need to be held. And my business is, it's reflecting that. My relationship with my husband is changing. So many things are have come right for me, really. But this, as you said, it's such important information. It really is such important information. And it's, what I really like about it as well is the subtlety of it. It's very, 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 very gentle. Really very, very gentle. And for me, it brought an incredible compassion for myself. I've been, my flatmates in Dublin, I was probably 29, I'd say. 28, 29. They found me hard to live with. Like, you can imagine what it was like for Brigid, living with Brigid, very, at that level of pain that I described as a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
And 15 years or 14, 15 years doing the meditation practices and being very diligent and it not working, just the depth of despair that I had when I found it, when I came across this work, and really as low as I'd ever been, the lowest I'd ever been, really. And in the last 2 years, just so much has turned around for me, and
it's brilliant that it's brilliant because we're the Two Norries podcast. Obviously, we talk about recovery, not just recovery from addiction, recovery from everything. And what worked for me, Timmy did something else. Yeah. Just something for everybody, and you're just after highlighting something that we didn't know about.
Do you know what I liked about what you said there? You spoke about, you got to a place in your life where you nearly tried everything, and then this came into your lap.
Yeah.
And this worked.
Yeah.
I think you have to try nearly everything until it works, because everybody is so unique within their skin. And not everything will work for everybody. And that is a fact, because what worked for you won't work for me. What worked for James won't work for me. It's so different. And I've gone to, I'm going to have to go on down a good few avenues now, like yourself as well. And I've gotten something from absolutely everything. Yeah. And I'm still going. Still going. And the next thing I'm going at is EMDR.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, because it's energy. There's trapped emotion from experiences in my past still there. So I'm going down that route. But I wouldn't have been able to go down that route a few years ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Because I'm more in touch with my body. Yeah. And I'm more in touch with the energies that are trapped within my body, particularly the shame, toxic shame, that's down here within me. And I think it's fantastic.
It is,
I think you're an absolutely amazing person, right? Yeah. And I think you have so much to offer. you know, and I could relate to a lot of your story, you know, with the introverted stuff and the head and the touch. And as the two of you are speaking there about the touch stuff, I could completely relate, because if I'm caught off guard and somebody touches me, it's like, holy fuck.
It's the hypervigilance from your past comes up, doesn't it?
Comes in, and I have to bring it back a little bit here, pal. You know, it's safe. It's a safe environment. Yeah. Nobody here wants to hurt you anymore. Yeah. You know, these people care about you. They love you. You know, I completely understood.
But even from the conversation we had there, now Timmy's going to start and he's the MDR, and you're only found what really worked for you later in life. Yeah. I started the Joe Dispenza meditation that Timmy did. I started that this week. But like,
powerful.
It's never too late, and we're evolving all the time, and we're always learning. It was great talking to you. Thanks for taking the time to come to us. If people want to buy your book and read your book, where can they access it?
So it's available in a couple of places. There's a website called printmybook.com. It's actually owned by Carrick Print in Middleton. They publish this. It's also available on Amazon.
Brilliant.
As well. But I'll give you the link information. I didn't actually remember to bring it with me here, but I'll give it to you. And
we'll stick it in the description.
For one as well, see, I read some of the book, right, and I was blown away by it. And it explains a lot about trauma and the continuation that we have to live with trauma in our bodies. And for a lot of people, they don't even believe that there's trauma there. They don't understand it. They don't know why they behave in a certain way. That book will help them to understand it.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important is it's not a textbook.
Yeah,
and and the words are big. They're big spaces, and the words easy to read as well.
It is, and it's like one of the lovely stories I think that's mine around. I've got a lot of really beautiful feedback from different people who've read it. Like there was one woman. She said it was the best description ever of her experience. You know, so I think there'll be people who will recognise their situation from it, you know, just from reading it. But there's also at my the book launch and my combined birthday party, some of my in-laws were there, and my husband said, now he said that they won't be buying your book. And I said that's fine, you know, because they're neither readers nor, you know, into healing. He also, you know, he does craniosacral therapy as well. And I said, that's fine. I said, there's no, you know, no, you know, I'm having a party, you know, just have people to enjoy it. But one of them ended up taking it, and I ended up getting a series of texts from him and from his wife, kind of leapfrogging back over the day, you know, the one from him saying, I must read your book. This was now, I didn't get home until late last night because they had travelled quite a distance. But when I get up now, I'll read it. So that was first thing, like he hadn't bought it. It was his wife had bought it. So he was obviously interested in it from what few words I had said about it. Got a text an hour or so later saying, I've read about 12 pages, but I must have the breakfast now. And then I got a text from his wife to say, our daughter is fascinated. She's never seen him with a book in his hand, and she sent me a photograph and he's sitting there reading it. And there was a series of back and forth all day. And at the end, he'd finished it. So he'd read it in a day. He's not a reader. He had enjoyed it, and he gave me feedback again. He said, I must get to read it and I'd ring it.
He related to it.
So very much. So it is quite easily read and easily relatable as well.
Brilliant. So, and we're going to give away a copy to our patrons as well. So thanks for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Brigid. It was a pleasure listening to you, and you're an amazing lady, and I mean that.
Thank you. And I just want to congratulate you on what you're doing. You know, there's how you present yourselves and the solidity of all of, you know, how you conduct your interviews and the whole thing. It's just very impressive.
Thank you so
much.
Thank
you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much. God bless. We see everybody next week. Slán.